1984, the Museum of Modern Art hosted an international survey of painting and sculpture. Of the 164 artists who were invited to participate, only 13 were women, and even less were artists of color. Female artists decided to protest the MoMA in its exhibition. They made signs and marched around the museum demanding equal representation. No one cared. A group of female artists and friends got together and decided they had to do something. They formed a feminist art collective and called themselves the Guerrilla Girls. They used the term guerrilla as a reference to guerrilla fighters and chose the word girl as a way to take back the term that was often used to disparage grown women. They wore gorilla masks to protect their identity and took the names of dead female artists. They decided that the best tactic was to use humor and facts to help change people's minds. They printed posters and plastered them all over New York City. The targets were often art museums, but also included art dealers, art collectors, and other pillars of the status quo. They not only fought for the representation of female artists, but also for all non-white artists. One of the Guerrilla Girls, who goes by the name Frida Kahlo, explained it this way. Culture is the story of everyone, and how can you really tell a story of a culture if you don't include all the voices of that culture? Otherwise, it's just the history and the story of power. In addition to the posters and art, they also wrote and released books that offered a different narrative on art history, a female perspective. In the Guerrilla Girls Bedside Companion to the History of Western Art, you can learn about the role of women both as artists and as a subject of men's art. Their unique blend of humor and shock imagery got the Guerrilla Girls noticed. They began to be invited into the art institutions that they critiqued. Often, the critiques would continue onto the very walls of the gallery. Over 35 years later, they are still the conscience of the art world. They participate in exhibitions and protests all over the world, and they still release report cards for art galleries showing their dismal record of representing female artists and artists of color. Very often, the numbers are not much better than they were in 1985. And so the critique continues, but they've added to the list of wrongs human rights issues, income inequality, and billionaire art collectors who dominate the art buying world. If you would like more information, visit their website at www.guerrillagirls.com.